Nick with logosbynick.com, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be talking about the problem we run into in Inkscape where we have objects placed exactly next to each other, yet there's still some kind of white gap running between them. And I'm going to show you how to work around this problem in Inkscape. And this is something that's, I've had this happen in Illustrator as well, so this is not something that's exclusive to Inkscape. This happens to be a, I think it's more of like a vector graphics sort of problem. So let me go ahead and minimize this. I don't really know the technical explanation of why this happens. All I can show you is the workaround. So let me create some rectangles here to demonstrate exactly what I mean. I'm just going to create some squares, and I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to place these next to each other like that, and I'll duplicate them and put them beneath each other. So we have 4 different boxes here, 4 different squares. Okay, now you can't really see any kind of aliasing here. No, well, not aliasing. You can't really see any of the white gap here because this problem tends to happen more with edges that are running diagonal and have like curved shapes, whereas these edges, they're running horizontal and vertical, so you don't really see it here. Let me just convert those to a path real quick. And actually, I'm just going to slowly zoom in, and maybe you'll see. Notice now, I zoomed in a little bit, and now you can see the white gap between those objects. They technically shouldn't be there. I mean, these objects are placed exactly next to each other. That white space shouldn't exist, but it does for some reason. So let me zoom in a little more. You see it went away when I zoomed in more, and then it came back when I zoomed in even more. So, and let me zoom out and show you. It looks all right as it is right here at 100%, but let me rotate these around so that the edges are going diagonally, and then you really start to see the problem. As you can see there is now clearly white space between those boxes. So there's 3 different ways that I know of to work around this, and all 3 of them are far from perfect, but they are viable solutions nonetheless. So the first one, the quickest and the easiest way, would simply be to just duplicate them. If I click and drag over them, group them together, right click, I'm going to duplicate. If you notice that those white gaps, they got a little less visible. They're still there, but they're a little less visible now. If I duplicate them one more time, they're still there, but they're very, very faint. You probably can't see them, but I could see it on my screen. So I'll duplicate it one more time, and now they're gone. So that's one way you can get rid of those lines. The problem, one of the problems with this method is that you're creating 3 or 4 times as many objects as needs to exist. And if you're working on like a big project with a big file and you're using up a lot of computer memory, you could run into problems with slowdown and your screen locking up and the computer having to, with the computer freezing and everything like that. So that's one of the drawbacks using this method. Another drawback is if you're working with any kind of transparency. So like let's say I have these objects here and I have them at like 54% transparency. If I go and duplicate them, the transparency is it's gonna lose some of that transparency. It's gonna keep getting darker. And if you notice, I'm duplicating this like 7 or 8 times, and those lines really aren't going away. So that's one instance where this method really doesn't work. So let's talk about the other way we can go about fixing this. Another way, which is pretty easy, is to simply just put an object, a solid fill object beneath it that's the same size. And I'll show you as an example. I'll just turn on the Snap to Cusp nodes. I'll grab the Bezier pen, which is over here, or you could just press B on the keyboard to grab that. And I'm going to draw a shape going around the object. And I'm going to make that the same color that the objects are. I'll get rid of the stroke by holding Shift and clicking the X. And let me go back to the Select tool and lower that to the bottom. And if you notice now, the white gap is gone. So that's another way you can go about fixing that problem. But the problem with this method is that you need all 4 of these objects to be the same shade. And quite honestly, when is that ever the case? I mean, in my experience, it's very rarely that I'm working with something that's all the same color like that, with objects put next to each other. And the reason they all need to be the same color, I'll demonstrate right now. I'm just going to ungroup those. I'm going to make these different colors: yellow, green, yellow, green. Now if you notice, those gaps are still there, but instead of white now they're just black. You may not be able to see it as much on your when you're watching this as like a video on the YouTube website, but on my screen I can see it. It's clearly there. And if I were to export this graphic, it would be there as well. There's clearly a black gap between those objects. So we didn't really fix the problem. We just changed the problem. So that's one time when using that method really won't work. And another problem with using that method, and it's also a problem with using the group and duplicate several times method as well, is something called aliasing. And I'll create a circle here just to demonstrate what I mean. We don't really have much of a problem with aliasing when we're working with straight edges. It's more so with curved edges. I'm just going to create a circle to show you. I'll make this black. Move over here. Oops. I'm going to duplicate this a few times. I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate that a bunch of times. And I'll take another copy and put it over here. Now if you look at these two different objects, they look the same upon first impression, but if you look closely you can see there's a distinct difference between them. This circle over here, if you look at the edges, it's perfectly smooth. If you look at the edges of this circle over here, you can see they're kind of choppy, almost like they were almost like it was cut out with a dull blade or something like that. It's got a very choppy, like rudimentary look. And that's the problem you run into when you start creating duplicate copies. Like if you're trying to take something like this, let me get rid of that black copy beneath it, and let me make them black again. If I start, duplicating them over and over again, you're eventually going to run into problems where you have this, what's called aliasing, going around the edges. You're just not seeing it happen with this object here because it's using straight edges. Anything with a curved edge, you will run into that problem with. So that's another thing to be mindful of. Let me go ahead and get rid of those circles. And the final method, and this is what I like to use the most often because in my experience it's the most applicable to most situations. So let me ungroup this to show you. I'm going to have to make these different colors to demonstrate this method better. I'll make this red, I'll make this green, blue, and yellow. What I like to do is I'll simply just take the edges of each object and move it out of the way of the other object using the Edit Paths by Nodes tool. And in order to do that, you're going to need to know, let me turn off the Snap to Custom Nodes, you're going to need to know which object is layered where. So what I like to do is I like to just grab this red object right here and I'll move it around to see where it's layered. I notice it's layered beneath the yellow copy and beneath the green copy. I'm not worried about the blue copy because it's not touching the edges of the blue copy. So I'm just looking at these two. It's layered beneath those two. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to the Edit Paths by Nodes tool and I'll click on that object and I'll take this edge and I'll just pull the edge out like that. And you can't really see what just happened there. Let me just lower the transparency so you can see it. What happened was it took the edge and it kind of curved it in there so it's no longer sitting flush against the edge of the yellow. And what happens when we do that is it'll get rid of any gaps in there. So I'll go through and I'll do this with the rest of these. I'll go to the Edit Paths by Nodes. Let me move that edge. Why is that not working? Let me see something. Oh, there we go. It's working. I just had to lower that transparency. So if you notice, I put the edge under there. And let me go back to this one. Let me see where the blue one is sitting. Okay, so the blue is above the green. So I'll have to take the edge of the green one and pull that in there. Let me just bring the opacity of that down. I'll take the edge of the green and put that in there. And where is the blue one relative to the yellow? It looks like it's above the yellow, so I'll take the edge of the yellow shape and I'll put that in there like that. And let me go back to the Select tool and I'm going to bring the opacity up all the way to show you. That's now, there's no spaces in there at all whatsoever. No white, black, nothing. No spaces in there. And I'll even change these all to black to show you. See, there's no spaces. You can zoom in, you zoom out. We've eliminated all of the gaps in there using that method. And another good thing about this method is that you don't run into the problem with aliasing. You don't run into the problem with using different colors. You will run into the problem with transparency, but with transparency, sometimes you don't have to use transparency. Sometimes you could just use a lighter shade of something. Like for example, if I have a red circle and I have it at like 50% transparency, I could just create another circle and bring the opacity up and make it a lighter shade of red to make it look very similar to that. And they both look like the same thing, just one has transparency and one doesn't. So that's another thing you could always do to work around this whole mess of different things with the white gaps and the aliasing and everything. Let me bring the opacity of that down a little more to show you. I think that should pretty much cover it. That's how you can go about working around this problem with Inkscape. And I think this would even apply to Illustrator as well, if you know how to take the tools in Illustrator and adapt them to what I'm doing here in Inkscape. It should work there as well. So if you have any questions about this, let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.